We are joined by Samford Athletic Director Martin Newton. He is the vice chair of the men's basketball committee. When you found out you were going to be the chair next year, what was your reaction?
Shock, probably first and foremost. Very appreciative and very humbled, to be quite honest with you. This was something that my dad was able to do. And so to be able to share that, in fact, I think we're the only father-son combination that's ever been the chair before. So I was really shocked. I was thankful. I was humble. And then I started thinking about all the responsibility that goes with it. And then I was probably a little depressed.
What does being the vice chair mean? What responsibility comes with that?
I think first of all, you serve as the liaison on the men's basketball oversight committee, which has been really good. I was on that committee beforehand when I was on the D1 Council for the Southern Conference, and that's been really educational, especially during the period that we're in right now, Dave, with all the transfer portals, the eligibility issues, and just kind of all the challenges that the NCAA and each of us face. So that's one thing. You're that liaison, and then I think primarily it's just really making sure that the chair is supported and that the committee is supported and whatever the responsibilities that they need me to do. Obviously, a lot of travel, especially as it relates to the tournament itself. And I was laughing with Joanne Scott the other day. She was giving me our schedule for the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, and it's like, wait a minute, you've got me going to Houston, to DC, to San Francisco, to Chicago, all in a 3-day window. I don't know. I'm getting a little old for that, but it's really going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited and anxious to learn from Keith Gill, who's the chair. Keith's a very intelligent man, very smart, very well-spoken, really understands the NCAA and understands the committee. So I'm excited to learn from him as well.
What did you learn this year from the non-conference?
That there's a lot of really good teams, right? Obviously, you've got a couple of teams like a Michigan and Arizona that have really stood out as far as how they're beating people. But there's a lot of really good basketball teams. And as you kind of look down, every Sunday I spend about 2 or 3 hours really kind of going through and looking at the teams, watching some synergy and some tapes on teams. And as I look at teams, even down into the 17, 18, 19, 20 rank in that area, you go, boy, those teams, there's some teams that are good enough to win a championship. But I do think there's two teams in my mind right now that have really kind of separated themselves is Michigan and Arizona are just, boy, the way they're beating people right now is just, it's interesting, but there's a lot of really good basketball teams out there. I think the different leagues, whether it's the Power Four leagues or even some of your top mid-major conferences, the Big East, the A10, Mountain West. There's some really good basketball programs out there as well. So it's going to be an interesting selection process this year.
Tell us something that might be new this year or that will be looked at differently this year as we move closer to March.
Well, I don't know that it's new, but the wins above bubble is something that's one of the metrics that we're gonna spend some time on this year. And we started last year really looking at that, and I think they fine-tuned some of that. I think that's something that each one of the committee members is really paying attention to, and as we kind of continue to be educated and do a deep dive into that metric will now be added to the other metrics that we use. So I think that's going to be something that. I don't know that, like I said, it's necessarily new, but I think it's something that will get utilized a lot more and get studied a lot more. But the NCAA staff, Dan Gavitt, Joanne Scott, they've done such a great job of respecting the past of this process and those that came before us, and really kind of gave their expertise to it, but yet continuing to refine it and tweak it so that we're making sure that not only are we selecting the best 37 teams, but we're also seeding them and then running an unbelievable tournament that's just second to no event in the country, in my opinion.
Do you suspect this is the final year when it's only 37 you're looking at?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's been a lot of really good conversation about that. There's a lot of, you try to take the feeling out of it and deal in facts. And so I think there's been some great dialogue, some great conversation. Some good debate on whether to expand, whether not to expand. And I think we're still in that process of trying to figure out what is the right thing to do for this tournament? Not what's the most popular thing to do, but what's the right thing to do for this tournament? Again, this is such a unique event. You've been around it. You've watched this. I know you're a basketball junkie. You've watched it a long time. So you've got something that's really good, like really, really good. And you don't want to stay at really, really good. You want to go to great. And so what makes the most sense to go to great? And maybe staying where you are makes the most sense. But then again, maybe adding some teams makes sense. So I think the debate, really looking into it of what's right for the tournament in the long haul is the most important thing.
Over many years, the committee has had to deal with player absences. Someone gets injured at the beginning of the year, they don't come back till the middle of the year. Someone gets hurt late in February, we don't know if they're going to play in the NCAA tournament. Now we have guys that have become eligible kind of late in the game. How do you navigate kind of players coming and going throughout the season?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting because the player availability has always been something that the committee relies heavily on. I mean, we will literally in the committee room as we get there, we'll talk about, player availability. How many games did this player miss? The conference monitoring is really important as those experts on those committees or on those conferences will kind of give that update of, yeah, this team, they may have gone 3-4 during this stretch or 1-4 during this stretch, but they were without their best player. But you're exactly right. Now you've got situations like the young man for Baylor, who's now eligible and playing midseason, wasn't with them for the first 2 months of the season, and now all of a sudden he's in. And that's something that, again, we're going to have to make sure that as we go through the monitoring process with the conferences and we're sharing that information with the rest of the committee, that's just another piece of the pie that we're going to have to make sure that the committee is aware of.
What about in an instance where there's a play at the end of a game, an official may have made a mistake, or maybe it's a 50-50, could have gone either way, but the result is somebody wins and somebody loses. Do you guys look at every win exactly the same, or is a win that maybe should have been a loss or vice versa viewed differently?
No, I think because you could say that then you're segmenting the game, right? You're saying, well, just the calls at the end of the game shape the outcome of the game. So I don't think you let and here's the one thing I've learned, and I'm the chair of the officiating committee this year, and working with Chris Rastetter and his crew, those guys don't get many wrong. It is amazing. As a fan, I watch, especially when my team's playing, we always, we always get the wrong whistle, right? But as the reality of it is, those guys don't miss a lot of calls. And I think the way the challenges work now we're seeing speed the game up, and they're being used in the right way now. I think that coaches have those in their pockets that if the end of the game, if they want to hold on to that so that they can make sure that they get it right. But no, we look at wins and losses. Again, that's where the net comes in, whether you're playing at home, you're playing away, or you're playing at a neutral site. That's what matters, not whether an officiator missed a call.
We've certainly talked about this before, but I think it's worth asking again. There's all this data and you can pore over it, but you also watch a million games. How do you blend those two things?
Well, I think you've got to be consistent with as a committee. There's 12 committee members, right? And so it's not like one committee member or one person is the voice in the room. There's 12 of us. And so I think having that conversation and watching games until we get into that committee room, the reality of it is our job starts at the beginning of the season as it relates to selecting, seeding the teams and putting the bracket. It starts at the beginning of the season. And so watching those games, understanding the metrics is really important. So by the time that we get in that committee room, most of the heavy lifting has been done. And we're prepared for the discussions and the conversations to make sure that we're putting the teams in the right place and we're selecting the right teams. But most of the heavy lifting has been done. And so each committee member has to be comfortable with what it is they feel are the most important things. I'm for example, I really look at strength of schedule. I think that's really important. The strength of schedule. Who'd you try to play? Wins above bubble again is one of those metrics that I think is really important to look at. But I try to take a mix of all of those so that when I'm comparing team A to team B, and maybe it's a bubble team, right? And I'm comparing those teams, that I'm comparing them with the same lens, the same metrics that I would use as I compared teams earlier in that process, in the selection process. But again, it's watching games, I think is very important as you move into that committee room so that you're prepared to have discussions about teams.
How much of the committee's work is already done in terms of what the non-conference record, ACC versus SEC, Big 12 versus Big 10, you have those numbers now. They're not going to change. How much of the work is done because of that?
Well, a lot of it. That's what I said. A lot of the heavy lifting is done throughout the course of the season. It's having the discipline and the commitment to do it on a weekly basis to make sure, like I said, every Sunday is my day to really dive into my team sheets and look at those team sheets and study those team sheets. I'm watching games throughout the week, but during that Sunday process, I'm really diving into the metrics and trying to understand and seed the teams where I think that they should be at that process. So by the time I get into that committee room, I've got a pretty good understanding of where I feel on things. And then there's still some games that are played out, right? You've got tournaments that don't end until Sunday, so we're having to do contingency brackets to make sure that we've got that right. But a lot of that heavy lifting, as I said, is done from really the start of November once we get into the to mid-March.
What can a SoCon or a league this size do, not necessarily this year, but in the next year, 2, 5, 10, to get a better seed, to get multiple teams? How do you go from being good to great?
Well, I think you've got to continue to try to schedule as good as you can. You've got to try to schedule games and quad one games potentially on a neutral site if you can get them, which is, as you well know, is very challenging for us. You've got to be able to be willing to travel and to play some teams at their place, but then you got to be able to win those games. And what you don't want, in my opinion, at our level, you don't want to be those play those games where the margin of loss could be detrimental to some of the metrics. And so I think it's really important to try to play teams that you have a pretty good percentage or a pretty good chance of competing in. And I think that's the key. You don't want to, be challenging for a SoCon team to go out and play one of the top 5, 10 teams in the nation because you're worried about the margin, or you play a team that the style of play may work for you so that, you may not get beat by 25, 30. It may be a 10, 12 point game. Those matter as it relates to the metrics. But at the end of the day, you just got to play games. You got to play to your best of your ability. You got to win the games that you're supposed to win. And at our level, you got to win the dadgum tournament. That's the hard part. You can have an incredible regular season, but if you don't win those 3 games in March, it's all for naught.
Thanks, Martin. Let's catch up again closer to Selection Sunday.
Appreciate you, Dave. Y'all take care.
Thank you.